The envelope sat beside my plate like it had more authority than anyone in the room. White, sterile, heavy with something that didn't belong at a dinner table. My name was typed across the front in sharp capital letters, machine-made, no hint of warmth. It looked like a bill. No, worse, it looked like a summons. I kept staring at it, hoping one of my parents would blink first, maybe laugh, maybe admit this was a joke in bad taste. But they didn't. Dad shoveled another forkful of roasted chicken into his mouth. Mom dabbed her lips with a napkin like we were at some polite banquet instead of our cracked wooden table. Adrian, my younger brother, didn't even notice. He was hunched over his phone, thumbs flying across the screen, earbuds dangling, grinning at whatever distraction meant more to him than reality. When I finally tore the envelope open, I expected at least handwriting, a note in my mother's looping script. Instead, a typed contract unfolded in my hands. I read the bold numbers out loud before I could stop myself. $1,500 a month. My voice cracked a little. Dad didn't look up. He said it like he was reading me the weather report. That includes rent, internet, electricity, and your share of household costs. Household costs. I scanned the neat little itemized list. $900 base rent, $200 utilities, $400 contribution to groceries and maintenance. At the bottom was a line in italics. Payment due on the 1st of each month. Late fees apply. My fork was still on the plate. My food was untouched. The smell of rosemary and garlic, once comforting, felt almost insulting now. Wait, I tried, but my throat closed. I glanced sideways. Adrian twirled his pasta like this was any other night, like his nails hadn't just been manicured and his hoodie didn't look brand new. He didn't even look at me. But Adrian does, I managed, my voice small. Mom cut me off with the kind of smile that wasn't really a smile. Honey poured over glass shards. He's still finding his path, sweetheart. You've got 2 jobs, you're stable. Stable, like that was a compliment, like being exhausted was proof of worth. I gripped the paper harder, feeling the corners cut into my palms. I'm stable because I haven't had a day off in 6 months, I said, low but firm. Because I work 8 to 4 at the bank, then run across town to serve drinks until midnight. Because I eat cereal for dinner and paint my nails myself and live in the room I decorated when I was 10. Nobody flinched. Adrian kept scrolling. Dad finally swallowed and leaned back in his chair. It's time you learned adult responsibility. The words landed heavier than the paper in my hands. My eyes flicked to the bottom again. Due on the 1st. Late fees apply. I almost laughed. I almost wanted to thank them for the comedy of it. When does this start? My voice was a whisper. Next week, Dad said. He sipped his water like it was already settled. Mom tapped her fork gently against the rim of her glass, a rhythm that reminded me of a clock ticking. And just so we're clear, late payments come with a $50 fee. It's how the real world works. Something inside me cracked, but not in the way they expected. They wanted me to nod, accept it like a scolded child. And I did nod because what else was I supposed to do? Fight? Flip the table? No. I folded the paper carefully, slipped it into my pocket like it was precious, and excused myself before the weight in my chest dragged me under. I climbed the stairs slowly, one at a time, the contract digging against my thigh. My childhood room was waiting, posters fading, the ceiling glow-in-the-dark stars peeling off. I shut the door, sat at my desk, and pulled out my laptop. The bank account balance blinked back at me. Not great, not empty. Hovering in that dangerous middle space where one wrong charge could send it spiraling. I stared at the screen until my reflection blurred into the glow. Then I opened a new spreadsheet and typed at the top, rent receipts. My fingers moved on their own. Line 1, base rent $900. Line 2, utilities $200. Line 3, household $400. I added another column, expenses they don't pay. Downstairs, Adrian laughed at something on his phone, his voice carrying through the vents. The sound grated against my skin. When I finally opened my credit card statement, my stomach lurched. Adrian's name was there, linked to purchases I never made. Streaming subscriptions, game downloads, an Amazon order. My chest tightened. The spreadsheet glowed back at me like a lifeline. Another tab, Adrian's charges. I didn't know what the lesson was supposed to be, but I knew I was learning. That night, sleep didn't come. I lay in the dark, the contract under my pillow like a curse, my brother's laughter still echoing, my parents' words looping in my head. Responsibility. Stable. $50 late fee. I thought of the world outside, neon signs flickering over the bar where I'd be working tomorrow, the steady hum of the bank lobby, the rhythm of my life I'd accepted as survival. And now survival wasn't enough. Now they wanted rent. I closed my eyes, whispering to myself like a promise, I won't drown here. The next morning felt heavier than usual. The air inside the kitchen was thick with the smell of burnt toast, the kind of smell that clings to clothes. Dad was already gone for work. Mom hummed at the sink, rinsing plates that didn't look dirty. Adrian sprawled on the couch with his laptop open, his legs dangling like he owned the space. I poured coffee, black and bitter, the way I needed it. My eyes wandered to the table. The envelope was gone, maybe tucked away in a drawer, maybe shredded. But I could still see it, feel its weight pressing against my pocket from last night. "Morning," Mom said, soft but distracted, like she was playing a role she wasn't invested in. I nodded, not trusting my voice. My throat still carried the scrape of yesterday's conversation. Adrian glanced up, smirking. "You look stressed last night. Did you cry?" I gripped the mug tighter. "You used my card again." He blinked, no shame, no apology. "Well, you never changed the login." "It's theft." My voice cracked. Mom turned, towel still in her hand. "Adrian is figuring himself out, Nevi. Don't be dramatic. You have a steady income. Supporting each other is what family does." Family, I almost laughed. Family, but only one direction. I earn, he spends. I sacrifice, they consume. I set the mug down before my shaking hand dropped it. "I'm not an ATM." Adrian snorted. "Relax, it's just money." The words burned. Just money, just rent, just utilities. Just my blood and hours traded for survival. I left the room before my voice could betray me, back upstairs where the spreadsheet glowed like a secret ally. I added another column, unauthorized charges. Cosmetics, streaming services, meal kits. None of them mine, all of them billed to me. Each click of the keyboard steadied me. Every cell filled was a piece of control I'd stolen back. I thought about pressing enter on the search bar I'd opened, how to dispute unauthorized family credit card use. My finger hovered. But then another thought intruded, one louder, sharper, how to open a high-yield savings account. At lunch the next day, in a different branch across town, I opened the account. No one I knew would see me. No questions. I used my work email, set up a P.O. box. I funded it with a $1,000 bonus I'd earned months ago for exceeding targets at the bank. A small start, but it was mine, untouchable. That night I updated the spreadsheet again. Rent payments, grocery receipts, utilities. Color-coded. Green for confirmed, yellow for disputed, red for Adrian's theft. Every box felt like a brick in the wall I was building between us. The house around me stayed the same, but I was already somewhere else. 2 days later, Ethan leaned against my teller window with his lazy grin. "You look like you're prepping for trial." "Maybe I am," I muttered. He raised an eyebrow, so I told him enough. The invoice, Adrian's charges, the rules of the house. He pulled out his phone, tapping quickly. "Want to see something?" The mortgage registry glowed on his screen. "Your parents refinanced last year. Delinquent, at least 90 days behind." The ground shifted under me. "But I've been paying." "They're not teaching you responsibility," Ethan said. His voice was sharp but kind. "They're keeping the lights on with your paycheck. That's dependence." His words clung to me all night. Back home, I opened my spreadsheet again and typed beneath mortgage, "This isn't about responsibility. This is about them drowning and dragging me under." I saved 2 copies, one on my desktop, one in the cloud. A folder labeled evidence. That weekend, the house buzzed with its usual chaos. Adrian shouting at his video game, Mom on the phone with a friend, Dad watching reruns of sports highlights. None of them noticed my absence at dinner. None of them asked where I'd gone. I sat in my car outside a coffee shop, sipping something cheap, scrolling through listings online. Foreclosed homes, desperate sellers, words like opportunity and reduced flashing like neon. I wasn't ready. But the thought of someday, burned in my chest like oxygen. Back in my room, the spreadsheet glowed again. My fortress of cells and numbers, color-coded battles. I stared at it, a strange calm settling over me. They thought they taught me about the real world. Maybe they had, just not in the way they intended. Not yet, I whispered to myself. But soon. I had tried to convince myself that the envelope was just a moment. A bad night, an overreaction, maybe even a test that would dissolve once they saw how shaken I was. But a few days later, the truth sat down at the dinner table with us, heavier than the food on our plates. The dining room was lit by the same flickering light bulb that had been threatening to burn out for weeks. The wallpaper peeled slightly at the corners, a reminder of how long we had been in this house, how many years of birthdays, arguments, and silent dinners the walls had absorbed. Tonight, though, the walls seemed thinner, as if they wanted to listen. Mom placed a casserole dish in the middle of the table, steam rising in curls. "Nevi, make sure you eat enough," she said lightly, though her eyes flicked to my plate, calculating. She didn't mean nourishment. She meant, keep up your strength so you can keep working. I forced a smile and spooned food onto my plate. Adrian was already piling his high, his phone propped against a glass, streaming some video I didn't care to recognize. He laughed under his breath, oblivious to the tension vibrating in the air. For a while, the only sounds were forks scraping and Adrian's muffled chuckles. Then Mom cleared her throat. "So, next week we'll need the first rent payment." Her tone was casual, like she was reminding me to take out the trash. I set my fork down. "You're serious?" Dad didn't even look up from his plate. "We've been over this. It's about fairness." "Fairness?" I echoed. My chest tightened. "You're charging me rent in my own house, but Adrian? He's still figuring things out," Mom interrupted smoothly, her fork poised midair like a conductor's baton. I turned to Adrian. "Figuring things out? Is that what you call lying around all day, playing games and—" "Back off," Adrian muttered, finally looking up. His eyes glinted with irritation, not shame. I inhaled sharply, trying to calm myself. "Back off, you're not paying a cent," and I stopped. The thought slammed into me like a gust of wind. I had been meaning to check my credit card statement, something about the balance hadn't added up last week. I swallowed. "Actually," I reached for my phone, opening the app under the table. The numbers flashed up, familiar charges I recognized, and then, no, my pulse quickened. Cosmetics, streaming subscriptions, gaming platform charges, a delivery order from a restaurant I'd never been to. My name was attached to all of them. The app confirmed what I already knew in my gut. I lifted my head, my voice low and trembling. "You've been using my card." Adrian's eyes widened for a split second, then narrowed into defiance. "So what? So what?" My voice cracked louder now. "You stole from me." His shrug was infuriating. "You never changed the login, not my problem if you're careless." My hands curled into fists. "That's not careless. That's theft." Mom set her napkin down carefully, the picture of control. "Don't call it that, Nevi. It's not like he's a stranger. He's your brother. Family helps each other." The room tilted slightly. The word family hung in the air like smoke, suffocating, unavoidable. "Helps each other?" My laugh was bitter, humorless. "You mean I help all of you? I work myself into the ground while he drains my account, and you—" I jabbed a finger at Mom. "You knew, didn't you?" Her silence was answer enough. She glanced at Adrian, then at Dad, then back at me with that calm, infuriating expression. "You're stable, Nevi. You can afford it." Stable. That word again, like a knife slid between my ribs. "I'm not stable," I whispered, my voice breaking. "I'm exhausted. I'm holding everything together while you pretend it's normal." Adrian rolled his eyes, smirking. "God, you're so dramatic." The heat surged up my throat. I wanted to scream, to hurl my plate across the table, to make them see me, not as a bank account, not as an endless resource, but as their daughter, their sister, a human being. Instead, I shoved my chair back. The screech of wood against tile made all three of them flinch. "I'm done." "Sit down," Dad commanded, his voice sharp, carrying the weight of authority he thought I still respected. I shook my head, my hands trembling. "No, not this time." I turned, walked out, and climbed the stairs 2 at a time. My heart pounded in my ears, drowning out whatever they shouted after me. In my room, I slammed the door and leaned against it, chest heaving. The spreadsheet glowed on my laptop screen, waiting for me like a confidant. My fingers flew across the keys, entering the new charges, marking them red. Red for every lie, every theft, every moment they dismissed me as dramatic. I stared at the columns filling with numbers, a story written in data. I whispered to myself, tasting the words like steel. "They're not teaching me responsibility. They're using me." And in that moment, the lesson was clear. I was no longer their safety net. I was building my own. The next few days were a blur of obligations that didn't feel like mine. I woke up before sunrise, stumbled into the bank in a pressed blouse and tired smile, counted stacks of bills that didn't belong to me, and smiled at customers who had more savings than I could ever dream of. At night, I traded the blouse for a black shirt, carried trays heavier than they looked, and kept the same tired smile for strangers who barely tipped. Every hour of my life was accounted for, yet the numbers in my account never seemed to reflect it. I was running in place, sprinting on a treadmill someone else controlled. By Friday night, my body ached like I'd aged 10 years in a week. My wrists burned from balancing trays, my legs buzzed from standing too long, and my stomach cramped from another shift fueled by caffeine instead of food. When I walked into the living room, Adrian was stretched across the couch like a king. My old sweatshirt hung loosely on his frame, claimed without permission. The TV flashed a reality dating show, the canned laughter echoing through the room like mockery. On the coffee table sat a package with my name on it. My stomach dropped before I even touched it. The weight, the tape, the familiar Amazon logo. "Adrian," I said carefully, holding up the box, "did you order this with my card?" He didn't even glance at me. "Maybe, you said I could once. That was months ago, for textbooks." He shrugged, his eyes never leaving the TV. "Well, you never changed the login." I waited for the apology that never came. Silence stretched between us, broken only by the laugh track from the television. Mom appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel. "What's going on?" "She used my credit card again," I said quietly, though my voice trembled with rage. Mom sighed, the kind of sigh that meant she was already bored of the problem. "Nevi, your brother is trying to find his way. You're the one with steady income. Why not support each other instead of keeping score?" I swallowed hard. Keeping score. That was how she framed it. Not theft, not exploitation. Keeping score. Adrian smirked, victorious without lifting a finger. I turned away before my face betrayed me. Upstairs, I locked my door and opened the credit card app again. Charge after charge blurred before my eyes. Cosmetics, streaming subscriptions, a monthly meal kit I'd never signed up for, all connected to the Wi-Fi account that linked us like a noose. My spreadsheet waited. I opened a new tab, labeled it Adrian's charges, and started listing each one. Red cells filled the page, glowing like open wounds. I hovered over the search bar again. How to dispute unauthorized family credit card use. My hand shook, but I didn't press enter. Instead, I opened another tab. How to open a high-yield savings account. The next day, during my lunch break, I crossed town to a credit union where no one knew me. The building smelled faintly of coffee and printer ink. I signed the forms quickly, my pen pressing deep enough to leave dents in the paper. I used my work email, rented a P.O. box for correspondence, and transferred a small bonus I'd earned last quarter, $1,000. It wasn't much, but it was mine. That night, I updated the spreadsheet again. Rent payments, utility contributions, groceries I'd bought without being asked. I created a new system: green for confirmed, yellow for disputed, red for Adrian's fingerprints. My screen glowed with color, each cell a piece of my life documented. Every click was a breath I hadn't been allowed to take before. 2 days later, while balancing deposits at my teller window, Ethan leaned over the divider with his lazy grin. "You look like you're preparing for court." "Maybe I am," I muttered, half a joke, half a truth. He tilted his head. "Want to see something?" Before I could answer, he pulled up the public mortgage registry on his screen. "Your parents refinanced last year," he said. "They're 90 days behind." I blinked at him, stunned. "But I've been paying rent, utilities, everything." He shook his head. "They're not teaching you responsibility, Nevi. They're keeping the lights on with your paycheck. That's not stability, that's dependence." His words hit harder than the contract ever had. The ground shifted under me, my entire world reframed in one breath. That night, I opened my spreadsheet again. Under mortgage, I added a new row in bold. This isn't about helping me grow. This is about keeping them from drowning. I made 2 copies of the file, one on my desktop, one in the cloud. I labeled the folder evidence. Then I lay back on my bed, staring at the ceiling. My room smelled faintly of lavender detergent and old paper. My childhood trophies lined the shelf, relics of a girl who had believed in effort and fairness. Now I knew better. The lesson was clear. I wasn't their daughter anymore. I was their paycheck. And the only way out was to stop being both. Morning arrived not with sunlight, but with the vibration of my alarm. It buzzed against the nightstand like an angry hornet. My eyes opened reluctantly, lids heavy, lashes sticking together from too little rest. The ceiling above me looked the same as it had every morning of my life. The faint cracks spreading like veins across plaster, the glow-in-the-dark stars I had stuck there at age 10 now faded into pale stickers. For a few seconds, I let myself pretend I was a child again, waking up without the weight of bills and obligations pressing down. But the illusion broke as soon as my phone screen lit up. Notifications crowded the display. Bank alerts, payment reminders, a balance update from my credit card that made my stomach clench. Somewhere in the house, Adrian laughed at something on his phone, his carefree joy floating up the stairs like smoke. I rolled out of bed, bones creaking as if I were twice my age, and pulled on the pressed blouse I kept for the bank. The mirror showed me a pale face with dark smudges beneath the eyes, lipstick faded at the corners of my mouth. I practiced a smile, just enough to pass for pleasant but not enough to invite conversation. By 8 o'clock, I was seated at my teller station, glass separating me from the world. "Next," I called out, forcing brightness into my voice. Customers slid bills through the slot, checks to deposit, forms to stamp. My fingers moved automatically, muscle memory carrying me through the motions while my mind lingered on numbers that had nothing to do with the bank's ledgers. 900 rent, 200 utilities, 400 household contribution, plus Adrian's thefts, each one a red wound in my spreadsheet. My coworker Ethan leaned into my space at one point, smirking. "You're running on fumes, Floris." I pressed my lips together. "Caffeine and stubbornness." He laughed, but his eyes softened. "Get some sleep or you'll collapse one day." Collapse. The word lingered like a prophecy. By 4, the bank doors shut, and I was already calculating the sprint to my second job. The bus smelled of sweat, perfume, and stale fries. I stood in the aisle gripping the pole, swaying with every turn, wishing I could close my eyes but terrified I'd miss my stop. The bar was chaos from the moment I clocked in. Music thudded through the walls, neon lights strobed across sticky floors, and voices clashed in drunken shouts. I carried trays stacked with glasses, dodged hands that reached for more than drinks, and smiled until my cheeks hurt. My manager clapped me on the shoulder during a lull. "Another double shift, huh?" I nodded, balancing a tray. "Bills don't pay themselves." He grinned, not unkindly. "Neither do families, apparently." I didn't answer, I couldn't. By midnight, my wrists screamed with pain, and every step felt like walking on glass. My uniform smelled of beer and lime wedges, my hair clung to my neck with sweat. When I finally left, the city outside buzzed in its own nocturnal rhythm, cars honking, laughter spilling from open doorways, streetlights casting long shadows. I walked fast, head down, every muscle yearning for my bed. Home was no sanctuary. Adrian lounged on the couch, a brand new controller glowing in his hands. My sweatshirt, mine, faded from years of wear, was draped over him like a crown. He didn't look up when I walked in. The TV blared another show, canned laughter filling the room. The smell of popcorn stung my nose. My stomach growled, but I didn't bother. Hunger had become familiar, a dull ache that didn't surprise me anymore. Upstairs, I peeled off my uniform and sat at my desk, laptop glowing. The spreadsheet was waiting. I typed in today's bus fare, the sandwich I had bought for lunch, the coffee I regretted but needed. Then I opened the credit card app and saw more charges, another online game, another delivery, another tiny theft. Red cells bloomed across the screen. Each one pulsed like an accusation. My fingers trembled, not from fear but from anger. A knock startled me. "Nevi?" Mom's voice, soft, coaxing. I closed the laptop halfway. "Yeah." She stepped in with a basket of laundry neatly folded. "I just wanted to thank you for helping us, for being so reliable." The words might have sounded sweet if I hadn't already tasted their bitterness. Reliable, that was her word for sacrifice. "Sure," I said flatly. She set the basket on my bed, smoothing the clothes as if that act could smooth the tension between us. "Your brother, he just needs time. He'll get there eventually." I barked a laugh, harsh and humorless. "While I drown in the meantime," her eyes flashed. "Don't exaggerate, Nevi. We all contribute in our own ways." My throat closed around the scream I wanted to unleash. "What ways?" My mind shouted. "What do you contribute except debt and excuses?" But I swallowed it because saying it would only bring more walls, more silence. After she left, I sat in the dark, staring at the faint light seeping through the curtains. The spreadsheet was still open, numbers glowing like tiny stars on a map of betrayal. My chest rose and fell, shallow and uneven. I realized then I couldn't remember the last time I had taken a deep breath without feeling guilt pressing against my lungs. The cracks were widening. The house was splitting open, not in wood or brick, but in trust. And I was the one caught in the fault line, trying not to fall. Saturday morning sunlight pressed weakly against the blinds, but it didn't feel like light. It felt like pressure. I pulled myself out of bed with the stiffness of someone twice my age. My bones creaked, my muscles ached, my brain screamed for more sleep, but the world didn't care. Downstairs, Adrian's voice thundered through the house. He was shouting into his headset, laughing, swearing at people on the other side of the screen. The sound carried like a parade, filling every corner until it reached me. When I walked into the living room, he didn't even notice. He sat cross-legged on the couch, controller glowing in his hands, a pile of empty chip bags and soda cans scattered like trophies of his night's work. "Headshot?" he roared, fist-pumping the air. I stood there silently, arms crossed, waiting. Nothing, not a hello, not an acknowledgement. To him, I was background noise, a ghost in my own house. Mom came in from the kitchen with a dish towel draped over her shoulder. "Adrian, tone it down," she said half-heartedly. "Your sister's trying to rest." He didn't lower his voice. He actually got louder like he was proving a point. My chest tightened. "Adrian," I said sharply. He finally glanced at me, annoyed that I'd interrupted. "What?" "There are new charges on my card, sneakers, food delivery, another subscription." He shrugged, turned back to his game. "Yeah, thanks for that." "Thanks," my voice cut like glass. "You said you'd pay me back." When I can, he said lazily, pressing buttons, eyes glued to the screen. You don't have a job. Stepped closer. You don't even have a plan, so when exactly is when you can? He paused the game and gave me a look full of disdain. God, you're always so dramatic. It's not a big deal. You have money. My fists clenched at my sides. It is a big deal when you steal it. He laughed, humorless, shaking his head. You're seriously overreacting. Mom, tell her. Mom sighed, rubbing her forehead. Nevi, please, don't turn every little thing into a fight. Your brother is just figuring things out. Figuring things out? My voice rose. While draining me dry, while I'm working 2 jobs just to keep the lights on. Dad appeared in the doorway, coffee mug in hand, brows furrowed. What's going on now? She's freaking out because Adrian ordered food, Mom said quickly, like she was smoothing wrinkles on a tablecloth. On my card, I snapped. Again. Dad took a slow sip of coffee. If you managed your money better, you wouldn't be so stressed. The words landed like a slap. I felt my whole body tremble with the urge to scream, to throw something to force them to see. But instead, I turned on my heel and walked out. At the grocery store later, the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, making everything feel harsher. I pushed a cart down the aisles, grabbing staples, milk, eggs, rice, pasta, vegetables, essentials. I moved like a machine, each item a chore, not a choice. At the register, the cashier bagged my groceries with a polite smile. That'll be $82.43. I swiped my card, forced a smile back, and slid the receipt into my wallet, another piece of evidence. When I got home, Adrian was waiting like a vulture. He dug into the bags, pulled out chips and soda, and vanished upstairs without a word. Mom unpacked the rest, humming like this was just another Saturday. I stood there, holding the receipt in my hand, my chest burning. I wanted to scream at all of them, wanted to shake them until they understood, but I knew it was useless. They didn't want to understand. They just wanted to consume. That night, after another shift at the bar, I collapsed at my desk. My body screamed for bed, but the spreadsheet pulled me in. I opened it, entered the grocery receipt into the green column. Then I entered Adrian's charges in red: sneakers, delivery, subscription. Red bled across the screen like wounds. I stared at the rows until the numbers blurred. Each one was a piece of me, stolen and unacknowledged. My breathing steadied as I typed. My hands, once trembling, grew firm. It wasn't just a spreadsheet anymore. It was a shield, a record, a weapon. Every click of the keys was an act of defiance. I started keeping the receipts in a shoebox under my bed, organized by month. Grocery receipts, utility bills, credit card statements. I labeled envelopes, wrote notes in the margins. It became a ritual, a secret practice that gave me back the control they'd stripped from me. Sunday evening, Ethan noticed my silence during our break at the bank. You're quieter than usual, he said, sliding half a sandwich toward me. I took it gratefully, realizing I couldn't remember my last full meal. You still tracking everything? He asked. Every penny, I replied. My voice was low but steady. Every theft, every excuse, he nodded. Good, keep doing it. You're gonna need it. His words sat with me long after he left. You're gonna need it. That night, I opened the spreadsheet again. My reflection hovered on the dark edge of the screen, eyes hollow, cheeks sharp. I didn't look like myself anymore. I looked like a witness preparing testimony. The sounds of the house pressed in, Adrian shouting upstairs, Mom talking loudly on the phone, Dad's TV buzzing in the living room. The life I was funding, surrounding me like a prison. I whispered into the empty room, my voice shaking but firm, I'm not your daughter, I'm your paycheck. The words echoed, bouncing off the walls. And for the first time, I didn't cry when I said them. I just believed them. I closed the laptop, slid the shoebox of receipts closer under the bed, and lay down. The ceiling crack stared back at me, old and unmoving. I made myself a promise, carved it silently into the air. If I don't get out soon, they'll consume everything. I won't let them. And with that, I drifted into a restless sleep, the weight of the house pressing down, but the fire inside me burning hotter than ever. Monday morning came heavy and gray, the kind of sky that made everything look like it had been dipped in ash. I dragged myself into the bank, hair pulled into a bun, blouse wrinkled from being slept in. My smile at the teller window felt paper-thin, but no one noticed. Customers didn't look at you, not really. They looked through you at their checks, at their balances, at their time. By noon, my eyes burned from staring at numbers that didn't belong to me. I excused myself for lunch, slumping into the break room chair with a sigh. Ethan slid across from me, his tray clattering on the table. You look like death warmed over, he said, unwrapping his sandwich. Thanks. I stabbed at the sad salad I'd packed. Exactly the vibe I was going for. He tilted his head. How long are you gonna let them do this to you? I froze, fork halfway to my mouth. Do what? Bleed you dry, he said simply. You work harder than anyone here, and for what? To keep your brother stocked in sneakers. Anger flared, then fizzled, replaced by exhaustion. What choice do I have? They're my family. Ethan leaned back, chewing thoughtfully. Family doesn't drain you, parasites do. His words lodged in my chest, sharp and unshakable. I wanted to argue, but I couldn't, not honestly. He reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, and slid it across the table. Look at this. I glanced at the screen. It was a listing on a real estate site, foreclosed property, 3 bedrooms, decent neighborhood, way under market value. Why are you showing me this? I asked, confused. Because it's possible, he said. Not today, maybe not tomorrow, but sooner than you think. You've been saving, right? I hesitated. My secret account wasn't much, but it was growing. Slowly. Quietly. Maybe, I admitted. Ethan smirked. Then start thinking about what's next. Don't just survive. Plan. That night, after my bar shift, I sat at my desk in the glow of my laptop. My body begged for rest, but my brain hummed with restless energy. I typed into the search bar, how to buy a home through an LLC. Articles popped up, dense with legal jargon. I read them all, my eyes scanning every line. I learned how to separate my name from ownership, how to protect my identity in public records, how to create a company that existed only on paper but carried real weight. By 2 a.m., my notes sprawled across several pages. My hand cramped from writing, but I didn't care. Each word felt like a step out of quicksand. I named the top of the page, Operation Exit. The next day, during a quiet hour at the bank, I spotted Mrs. Alvarez. She was a long-time client, silver hair pulled into a neat bun, her cane resting against her chair as she filled out a deposit slip. She had been a lawyer once, I remembered vaguely, real estate, contracts, something like that. I hesitated, then approached. Mrs. Alvarez, can I ask you something personal? Her eyes crinkled with warmth. Of course, Mija, sit. I lowered myself into the chair beside her, my hands twisting nervously. How hard is it to set up a company, just on paper? For real estate. Her brows lifted, but she didn't laugh. She studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Not hard if you know the right forms, harder if you do know why you're doing it. I swallowed. To protect myself. She patted my hand. Then it's the right reason. We spoke for 20 minutes. She explained shell companies, LLC filings, tax IDs. She scribbled notes on a napkin, gave me the names of websites and state forms. Her voice was steady, practical, no judgment in her tone. Start small, she advised. Keep it quiet, don't tell anyone until it's done. I left with the napkin folded carefully in my pocket, my pulse racing. That night I started the paperwork. A new email, a new P.O. box, a name for the company. I typed 3 words into the form and stared at them, my fingers trembling. Silver Dawn LLC. It sounded like light breaking through after endless night, like a promise. When I clicked submit, something inside me shifted. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt the faintest flicker of control. I shut the laptop, lay back in bed, and whispered into the dark, I'm not just recording anymore, I'm building my escape. And for the first time, sleep came without nightmares. I began to live a double life. On the surface, I was still the same daughter who worked long shifts, came home tired, and quietly paid bills without protest. But beneath that surface, every hour, every errand, every receipt became part of a different story. A story no one else in the house could see. The first test was moving a single box. I filled it with books I had kept since high school, novels with underlined passages and margins filled with notes. To anyone else, they were just heavy paperbacks, clutter I could donate or throw away. To me, they were evidence that I existed beyond being a provider. I taped the box shut, labeled it with a fake word and marker, and carried it out to the bus stop as if I were going to work. Nobody asked questions. Nobody even looked up. I dropped it off at the storage unit, and when the metal door clattered down, I felt the smallest flicker of triumph. 1 box down, hundreds to go. The next weeks blurred into a rhythm. Work, home, bar shift, storage. Each trip I carried something. A bag of sketch pads, a stack of clothes I actually liked, framed photos of friends who had once mattered to me. I kept duplicates in my room so the absence would not be obvious. A sweater left behind, a cheap pair of shoes in the closet, a few notebooks with nothing written inside. Enough camouflage to keep suspicion at bay. Every night I sat with my spreadsheet. I added new tabs for storage inventory, moving costs, attorney contacts. I mapped timelines, how long until utilities could be disconnected, how long until the lease transfer for a potential property could be filed. My shoebox of receipts became 2 shoeboxes, then 3. I stacked them neatly under my bed, each one labeled with dates and categories. They were my proof, my ammunition, my secret history. There were moments when fear almost stopped me. One evening, Adrian barged into my room without knocking, looking for a charger. My heart slammed so hard I thought it would burst through my chest. The folder operation exit lay on my desk, half open, and for a terrifying second his eyes drifted toward it. But then he grabbed the charger, muttered thanks, and left without another glance. I sat frozen for minutes, listening to his footsteps fade. After that, I kept the folder hidden in the lining of my duffel bag, padlocked inside when I wasn't working on it. My secret couldn't survive another brush with his laziness. The storage unit began to feel like a second home. Its metal walls were bare and cold, but when I opened the door and saw my canvases stacked against one wall, the boxes labeled with careful handwriting, it felt like a private sanctuary. Here, no one shouted at me to cover rent. No one drained my account for sneakers. No one dismissed my exhaustion as drama. It was just me and my future, waiting patiently in cardboard and bubble wrap. Mrs. Alvarez called one evening to check on me. She asked if I had followed the filing instructions, if I had kept copies of everything. Her voice was calm, deliberate, full of the kind of authority that made me believe I wasn't crazy for doing this. I told her about the storage unit, and she chuckled softly. "That's how you know you're serious," she said, "when you start building a life somewhere else, even if it's just boxes." Her words carried me through another sleepless night. Noah helped when he could. He never asked questions, never teased me, never demanded explanations. He simply showed up with his trunk empty and his arms ready. Once, as we loaded a particularly heavy box of art supplies, he looked at me with quiet seriousness. "You're really leaving, aren't you?" I didn't answer, but the look on my face must have been enough. He nodded and said, "Then let's make sure you don't leave anything behind that matters." That kind of loyalty was rare, and it strengthened me more than any hours of rest could. At home, I perfected the art of invisibility. I smiled when spoken to, nodded when blamed, kept my voice neutral even when anger coiled in my gut. I avoided confrontation, knowing that every fight risked exposing my preparations. Adrian kept stealing, Mom kept excusing, Dad kept dismissing. I let them. I gave them the performance they expected while behind the curtain I rewrote the entire play. I even trained myself to sleep lightly. Each sound in the house became part of my awareness. The creak of the stairs when Dad went to bed, the hum of the refrigerator cycling on, the slam of Adrian's door after another late-night gaming session. These sounds told me when the coast was clear, when I could slip out quietly with another bag or return from the storage unit without anyone asking where I had been. My body learned to move silently, to pack quickly, to hide evidence before anyone looked. As the weeks passed, the storage unit filled. The walls closed in with stacks of my life, but instead of suffocating me, they buoyed me. Every new box meant less of me trapped inside that suffocating house. I was relocating piece by piece, carving myself out of their grasp. The unit smelled faintly of cardboard and dust, and every time I locked the door, I imagined locking away their control over me. The most dangerous step came when I began shifting finances. I rerouted small automatic payments to my secret account, disguised them as routine transfers. I withdrew cash at odd hours and tucked it into envelopes marked with codes only I understood. I even practiced my signature until it matched perfectly between accounts, ensuring no one could accuse me of forgery or mistake. It was meticulous, exhausting work, but it gave me the thrill of building armor. Piece by piece, dollar by dollar, I was making myself untouchable. One night, after a grueling bar shift, I sat on the edge of my bed staring at the packed duffel bag. My hands hovered over the zipper, tempted to leave right then, but I wasn't ready yet. Not everything was in place. If I left too soon, they would find a way to pull me back. I forced myself to breathe, to remember the timeline, to trust the plan. Impulses would only destroy what I had built. I needed patience, discipline, precision. The turning point came with a phone call from Mrs. Alvarez's colleague. He had found a property that matched our criteria: small, manageable, undervalued, and soon to be listed. The words flowed through the phone like a lifeline. My pulse quickened as I scribbled details into my notebook. It wasn't the house yet, but it was the doorway. Silver Dawn LLC would have its first real test. The plan wasn't a fantasy anymore. It was happening. That night I updated the spreadsheet with a new tab. I titled it Future. It contained the property address, estimated costs, and a timeline for filing. I stared at the word until the letters blurred. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt hope not as a cruel trick but as a living thing inside me. The shoeboxes under my bed were heavy now, nearly bursting with receipts and statements. I knew that when the time came, I would bring them out like weapons, proof of every theft, every misuse, every sacrifice demanded of me. But until that day, they remained hidden, humming with silent power. I went to sleep with the folder under my pillow. Operation Exit was no longer just a folder. It was a living plan, breathing with every step I took. The house still pressed against me like a cage, but I no longer felt like prey. I felt like someone biding her time, sharpening her knives, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The day I finally left began like any other. That was the trick of it, the camouflage. If anyone sensed even a ripple of difference, suspicion would follow, and suspicion was the enemy. I made coffee in the kitchen, my movements calm, unhurried. Adrian was passed out on the couch, controller still in his hand, a half-empty soda can tipped over beside him. Mom hummed in the laundry room. Dad was already gone, off to wherever he went in the mornings. It looked like an ordinary household. No one noticed the duffel bag tucked into the back of my closet, packed with the last pieces of my life. I walked to work like always, but my heart raced under the surface. Each step carried weight. This might be the last time I made this commute as their daughter. This might be the last time I returned to that house as someone who owed them anything. At the bank, the hours crawled. I counted bills, stamped checks, smiled at customers, but inside I was rehearsing. I pictured the movements like choreography: open closet, lift boxes, load car, leave note, lock door, over and over until my body knew the rhythm by heart. Ethan noticed my distracted air and leaned across the counter. "Big night?" he teased. I forced a smile. Something like that. If he guessed the truth, he didn't press. Maybe he already knew. When my shift ended, I didn't go straight home. Instead, I met Noah at the corner lot where we had parked his car the night before. The trunk yawned open, empty, and ready. His eyes were steady, no judgment, no questions, only support. "You sure?" he asked. I nodded. "If I don't do it now, I'll never do it." The drive back to the house felt surreal. My chest thudded with every passing streetlight. The sky was fading into dusk, a perfect cover. I knew the schedule: Mom at a late church group, Dad at a card game, Adrian out with friends. The house would be empty for at least 3 hours. Enough time if I moved fast. When we pulled up, the windows glowed faintly with the automatic lights. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The air smelled like detergent and old carpet. It was the same smell I had grown up with, the same smell that had soaked into every memory of childhood. But tonight it smelled different. Tonight it smelled temporary. Upstairs, my room was bare already, stripped of personality by weeks of quiet removal. Posters gone. Bookshelves half empty. Drawers with only clothes I didn't care about. It looked like a room someone had borrowed and never claimed. That made it easier. Noah carried boxes down the stairs in silence. I packed quickly, my movements rehearsed, efficient. The canvases went first, then the shoeboxes of receipts, then the folder of documents. Each trip out the door felt like stealing from myself, except the self I was stealing from no longer existed. At one point, I paused in the doorway of the kitchen, staring at the refrigerator. It was plastered with magnets from vacations I had paid for but never enjoyed, grocery lists written in my handwriting, unpaid utility bills tucked under clips. I wanted to rip them all down, to erase the proof of how long I had carried them. But there wasn't time, and maybe leaving them there was its own kind of justice. Let them look at those bills without me. Let them see what responsibility really meant. Finally, the last box slid into the trunk. My chest expanded with a breath so deep it almost hurt. I went back inside alone for one last task. On the kitchen table, I placed a single folded sheet of paper. The words were short, sharp, final. "I will not be paying for this house anymore. All accounts in my name will be closed. Forward official mail to this address." I left no apologies, no explanations. They had taken enough from me already. They didn't deserve the weight of my reasons. I placed my house key beside the note. The metal gleamed under the overhead light. For years, that key had felt like a shackle, proof of obligation. Now it looked like freedom. I stood in the doorway, hand on the knob, and looked back once. The living room sagged with neglect, cushions dented from Adrian's weight, carpet stained from years of careless spills. The staircase loomed, worn from footsteps that had never carried gratitude. For a moment I felt sadness, but it was distant, like watching rain fall on another city. This wasn't my home anymore. It hadn't been for a long time. When the door shut behind me, the click echoed like a gunshot. Final, absolute. Noah didn't speak as we drove away. The silence between us was steady, grounding. I pressed my forehead to the cool glass of the window and watched the house shrink in the rearview mirror. Each block we put between us felt like a chain falling away. By the time we reached the highway, my chest felt lighter than it had in years. At the storage unit, we unloaded quickly, stacking boxes with practiced ease. I ran my hand over the canvases, the shoeboxes, the folder, all safe in their new space. This was my life now, contained in neat piles behind a metal door. It was small, yes, but it was mine. Entirely mine. When the door rolled down and locked, I leaned against it and laughed. Not the bitter laugh of exhaustion, not the hollow laugh of irony. A laugh that bubbled up from somewhere deep, untapped. Noah smiled at me, and in that moment I knew he understood. We left the storage unit and drove to his sister's apartment, where I would crash until I found a place of my own. The guest room was tiny, barely big enough for a bed and a dresser, but when I lay down that night, it felt like a palace. No shouting, no blame, no theft, just silence and the faint hum of the city outside the window. I closed my eyes and whispered into the dark. I'm free. And for the first time in longer than I could remember, I believed it. The first morning in the guest room felt unreal. I woke without the sound of Adrian yelling into his headset, without Mom banging pots in the kitchen, without Dad's television droning in the background. Instead, there was only the muffled hum of traffic and the occasional bark of a dog outside. For a few seconds, I didn't know where I was. Then I remembered. The boxes in the storage unit. The key left on the kitchen table. The door closing behind me, I lay still for a long while, just breathing. My chest rose and fell without the weight of dread pressing down. The air smelled faintly of detergent and lavender, not of stale carpet. I felt like I had been dropped into someone else's life, and in a way I had. This life didn't belong to them. It belonged to me. Noah's sister, Clara, greeted me in the kitchen with a kind smile. She offered me coffee, sliding a mug across the table. "Stay as long as you need," she said. Her generosity nearly undid me. I nodded, unable to form words, and wrapped my hands around the mug. The warmth seeped into my fingers, and for the first time in years, no one asked me for rent, no one pushed a bill across the table, no one hinted at obligation. After breakfast, I walked to the storage unit. Unlocking the metal door felt like opening a secret vault. My canvases leaned patiently against the wall, boxes stacked neatly like soldiers waiting for orders. I pulled out a sketchbook and carried it back with me. In the quiet of Clara's apartment, I opened to a blank page. My pencil hovered above it. For years I had told myself I was too tired, too busy, too drained to draw. Now I had no excuses. The lines came slowly at first, awkward and hesitant. But soon they curved into shapes, figures, fragments of a world that belonged only to me. My hand ached, but I didn't stop. When I finally leaned back, the page was no longer empty. Neither was I. The days that followed settled into a new rhythm. I still worked my shifts at the bank and at the bar, but they felt different now. I no longer dreaded returning home because home was no longer a trap. When customers complained, when managers barked orders, when drunks made a mess of my trays, I held on to the knowledge that none of it followed me back to that suffocating house. I had carved out a space for myself, however small. I began searching for apartments, scanning listings in every free moment. Most were overpriced, some were scams, a few seemed possible. I ran numbers late into the night, cross-checking against my savings, calculating down to the last cent. The discipline I had built through years of spreadsheets now became my lifeline. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about creation. One evening, I met Mrs. Alvarez at a quiet cafe. She listened patiently as I told her what I had done. She didn't scold me for leaving a note instead of a conversation. She didn't pity me for walking away from family. She simply nodded, eyes sharp with understanding. "Freedom is rarely polite," she said. Her words sank into me like truth I had always known but never dared to speak. Still, freedom carried shadows. Some nights I lay awake, imagining my parents finding the note, Adrian's anger, Mom's tears, Dad's silence. Guilt gnawed at me, sharp and insistent. But then I thought of the shoeboxes under my bed, the red cells on my spreadsheet, the nights I had cried alone while they dismissed me as dramatic. The guilt never vanished, but it became manageable, like background noise I could live with. Adrian texted once. Just one word, seriously? I stared at it, my finger hovering over the reply button. 1,000 responses crowded my mind, sarcasm, rage, explanations. In the end, I typed nothing. Silence was the answer he had earned. I blocked his number. The bar, Ethan noticed the change in me. "You're lighter," he said one night, handing me a fresh towel. "Like you're not carrying a boulder around anymore." "Maybe I dropped it," I replied. He grinned. "Good, don't pick it back up." Even the smallest routines felt different. Grocery shopping became almost joyful. I filled a basket with only what I wanted: fruit, pasta, spices I had never bought before because they seemed like luxuries. I paid with my own card, knowing no one else would drain the account. Cooking in Clara's kitchen, I tasted freedom in every bite. I began leaving small drawings on the fridge as thank you notes. A sketch of her cat curled on the windowsill, a doodle of a flower in a mug. She laughed when she found them, tacking them to a corkboard by the door. Her acceptance made the space feel less like a stopover and more like a sanctuary. One Saturday, I returned to the storage unit with Noah. We reorganized the boxes, stacking them higher, creating more room. At the very back, I placed the shoeboxes of receipts. Noah noticed the careful labels and raised an eyebrow. "Evidence?" he asked. "Proof," I said simply. He didn't press. Standing there, surrounded by my belongings, I felt the scale of what I had done. I had extracted myself from a life that had drained me for years. Piece by piece, I had reclaimed who I was. And though the future still felt uncertain, the path behind me was clear. I would never go back. That night, I opened my sketchbook again. This time, the lines flowed easily, confident, and bold. I sketched a door half open, light spilling through into darkness. At the bottom, I wrote 3 words in small, steady letters. I walked through. When I closed the book, I realized I was smiling. Not the polite smile I wore at the bank, not the strained smile I faked for my family. A real one. The kind that came from somewhere unbreakable. I was free. And freedom, even in its raw and unfinished form, was enough to keep me moving forward. It started with a letter. Not to me this time, but to them. I imagined the scene even though I wasn't there. Mom picking up the envelope from the mailbox, probably annoyed that the electricity bill had arrived again. Dad tearing it open at the kitchen table, expecting numbers he could ignore until I paid them. Adrian rolling his eyes in the background, scrolling through his phone. And then the silence that must have filled the room when they realized what the letter actually said. The property had been sold. Their house, the place they took for granted as unshakable, now belonged to a company named Silver Dawn LLC. Effective immediately, all communications regarding tenancy would go through the listed office. A legal, official letter, heavy with language no one could argue with. I wasn't there to hear their voices rise, but I could picture it. Mom's sharp panic, Dad's disbelief, Adrian's profanity-laced outrage. I could almost hear the way they would call my name, as if speaking it loudly enough could summon me back to fix the disaster. Except I wasn't there anymore. That was the entire point. The first call came in the middle of my shift at the bank. My phone buzzed in my pocket again and again until I excused myself to check it. Dozens of missed calls, my mother, my father, even Adrian, whose number I thought I had blocked. Voicemails piled up like debris after a storm. "Nevi, what is this? What's going on with the house? Call us back right now. This isn't funny. Did you know about this? Did you, God, please tell me this is a mistake?" Each message dripped with panic, but beneath it was something else, fear. For the first time in years, they were the ones afraid, not me. I slipped the phone back into my pocket and returned to the counter with a calmness that surprised me. Customers lined up with their checks and deposits, oblivious to the tidal wave crashing against my old life. I stamped forms, smiled, and handed out receipts. My family's world was tilting, but mine felt steady for once. After work, I stopped by the storage unit, unlocked the door, and sat on a box while the cool metal walls echoed around me. I listened to the messages again, one by one, letting their voices wash over me. Mom pleading, Dad demanding, Adrian threatening. It was like hearing ghosts rattle chains, desperate to drag me back. I deleted the voicemails. The next day, they escalated. Clara told me my parents had come by looking for me, knocking on her door with frantic expressions. She had stood firm, saying politely that I wasn't home and that they should try calling instead. Her voice trembled a little when she told me, but her eyes were steady. "They seemed desperate," she said, desperate. The word sent a strange shiver through me. I had spent years in desperation, clawing to make ends meet, stretching myself thin so they could live comfortably. Now the roles had reversed. By the end of the week, the letter had sunk in. They couldn't deny it, couldn't wave it away. Silver Dawn LLC owned the deed. I had timed it perfectly. The paperwork filed, the funds transferred, every detail locked in place before they even knew to protest. The house they had forced me to pay rent in, the house they had treated me like a tenant within, no longer belonged to them. It belonged to me, though they didn't know it yet. Another message arrived, this time from my father, his voice hoarse and low. "Nevi, we need to talk, please. We don't understand what's happening. Just meet us. Give us a chance to explain." Explain. The word nearly made me laugh. They wanted to explain now after years of never listening to mine. They wanted a chance after taking every chance from me. I didn't answer. Not yet. Instead, I walked through the city streets with my sketchbook tucked under my arm. The world around me buzzed with life, cars honking, people shouting, music spilling from open windows. For the first time, I felt like part of that world instead of trapped behind glass. My steps were light, my lungs full. They were trapped now, not me. Still, I knew this couldn't last forever. They would find me eventually. They would demand answers face to face. And when that happened, I needed to be ready. So I gathered my weapons, the shoeboxes of receipts, the spreadsheets, the statements, every proof of every dollar I had been forced to pay, every theft Adrian had committed, every bill I had covered. I organized them into a neat folder, labeled and tabbed. The evidence was undeniable. When the time came, I would lay it before them like a mirror they couldn't look away from. One evening, as I locked the storage unit, my phone buzzed again. A new voicemail. This one wasn't angry. It wasn't demanding. It was my mother, her voice breaking. "Please, Nevi, we don't know what to do. We can't lose the house. Adrian is beside himself. Your father says he doesn't know how to fix this. We need you. We need your help." For a moment, my chest tightened. Old habits die hard. The instinct to rush to their side, to shoulder the burden, to fix everything, it rose in me like a reflex. But then I remembered the nights I had gone hungry so Adrian could eat takeout. The mornings I had dragged myself to work on 2 hours of sleep while Dad criticized my spending. The afternoons Mom had told me to stop being dramatic when I begged for relief. They needed me now, but I didn't need them. I slipped the phone back into my pocket, straightened my shoulders, and walked away from the storage unit. The confrontation was coming. I could feel it like thunder in the distance, and when the storm finally broke, I would be ready. They found me on a Thursday evening. I was leaving the bank, clutching my bag with the folder of evidence tucked safely inside, when I saw them across the street. My mother's face was pale, my father's eyes sunken, Adrian pacing with restless energy like a caged animal. For a moment, instinct screamed at me to run, but I stopped. I had been running my whole life, not with my legs, but with my sacrifices, my excuses, my silence. Tonight, I would not run. They crossed quickly, voices overlapping before they even reached me. "Nevi, thank God, we've been trying to reach you. What the hell is going on with the house? You can't just let some company take it, do something." I held up my hand, calm, steady. "Not here. If you want to talk, we'll do it somewhere private." We ended up in a small cafe 2 blocks away. The irony wasn't lost on me. The same kind of neutral space where people discussed mortgages and contracts, now the battlefield for our family reckoning. We sat at a corner table, my folder resting in front of me like a shield. Mom leaned forward immediately, desperation etched across her features. "We got a letter. Silver Dawn LLC. They said the deed has transferred, that we're no longer the owners. Nevi, you work at a bank, you can help us fight this, right? Tell us it's a mistake." I met her eyes evenly. "It's not a mistake." Dad's jaw clenched. "Then you know who's behind it. Tell us, we'll go to them directly." I opened the folder, pulling out the first tabbed section. Receipts spilled onto the table, lined neatly in envelopes. "You already have." They stared at me, uncomprehending. Adrian scoffed. "What the hell are you talking about?" I laid the paperwork flat, tapping the top page. "Silver Dawn LLC, that's me." Silence. Heavy, suffocating silence. Mom's mouth fell open. Dad's eyes narrowed, scanning the documents as if they might dissolve under scrutiny. Adrian barked a laugh, sharp and incredulous. No, you're lying." I slid the official registration form across the table, my name redacted, the company name bold at the top. "It's all legal, all binding. The house is no longer yours. It belongs to Silver Dawn. It belongs to me." Mom shook her head, voice breaking. "Why would you do this? We're your family." My throat tightened, but I forced my voice to stay level. "Family doesn't steal from you. Family doesn't drain you dry and call it responsibility. Family doesn't make you pay rent in your own home while your brother spends your money on games and sneakers." Adrian slammed his fist on the table. "You think you're better than us? You think you can just take everything?" I turned to him, pulling another stack of papers from the folder. Credit card statements, each one highlighted in red. "These are every charge you made on my card, every game, every delivery, every luxury you couldn't afford. You never even tried to pay me back, not once." His face flushed, mouth opening then closing with no words to fill the gap. Dad leaned back, rubbing his forehead. "You could have talked to us. We could have worked something out." I let out a bitter laugh. "I tried talking. For years, you dismissed me. You told me I was dramatic, that I needed to manage better. You wanted me silent because my silence kept you comfortable." Mom reached for my hand, but I pulled it back. "Please, Nevi, we'll do better. We'll make changes, just don't take our home." I closed the folder with deliberate calm. "It's not your home anymore, it's mine. And if you want to stay there, you'll do exactly what you made me do, pay rent. On time, every month, no exceptions." Her breath hitched. Dad stared at me like he didn't recognize the person across the table. Adrian muttered a string of curses under his breath, but none of them mattered. The balance had shifted. The power was mine now, and there was nothing they could say to tilt it back. I stood, gathering the folder under my arm. This is the only conversation we're going to have. The terms are simple: pay your rent or leave, just like you taught me. As I walked out of the cafe, their voices rose behind me, pleading, angry, confused. But I didn't turn back. On the street outside, the air felt crisp, the city lights sharp against the night. I drew in a deep breath, and for the first time in my life, I felt untouchable. The storm had broken, and I was still standing. Days passed after the confrontation, but their echoes lingered. I carried the image of them across the cafe table everywhere I went. Mom's trembling hands, Dad's weary eyes, Adrian's flushed, wordless rage. They had looked at me as if I were a stranger, someone unrecognizable. In a way, they were right. The girl who once bent under their demands was gone, yet silence didn't last long. They began to appear in small ways, like shadows trailing me. A knock on Clara's door one evening, a voicemail from my father's number. Adrian lurking outside the bar after my shift, pacing in the parking lot until Noah stepped out and made him leave. Their desperation had grown teeth. Then one afternoon, Mom came alone. She waited for me outside the bank, holding a worn envelope. Her hair was unkempt, her eyes swollen. For the first time in years, she looked smaller than me. "Nevi," she said softly, "please, just a moment." I hesitated. Part of me wanted to walk away, to prove that nothing she could say mattered anymore. But another part, the part still tethered to memories of childhood, couldn't quite ignore her. I nodded once and followed her to a nearby bench. She opened the envelope with shaking hands and pulled out a photograph. It was old, edges frayed, colors faded. A picture of me at 14, standing in front of an easel at a school art show. My hair was messy, paint smudged on my cheek, but my smile was wide, unguarded. Behind me, a painting of a cityscape glowed with impossible light. "I kept this," Mom whispered. "All these years, I was proud of you. I didn't say it enough. Maybe I never said it at all, but I was proud." The photograph trembled between us. My chest tightened, the weight of years pressing down. That girl in the picture, the girl who believed art could change her world, felt like a ghost now. Mom's voice broke. "I know we failed you. I know we leaned too hard, expected too much. But this house, it's our life. It's all we have. Don't take it away. Please, Nevi, we'll change, we'll do better." For a moment, the urge to believe her burned hot. I wanted to step back into that photograph, to let her words stitch over the fractures, to pretend things could be healed with an apology. But then I remembered the spreadsheet, the endless red cells, the countless nights I cried alone while they dismissed me. Pride wasn't enough. Promises weren't enough. I closed her hand gently around the photo and pushed it back toward her. "You were proud of me when I was painting, but you stopped being proud when I was paying. You wanted a provider, not a daughter. And now you want forgiveness because the consequences finally reached you." Tears welled in her eyes. "Please, Nevi, just give us another chance." I stood, my voice quiet but firm. "I already gave you years of chances. This is where it ends." She reached after me, but I pulled away. The photograph fluttered to the ground between us, catching the light. I didn't pick it up. Walking back to Clara's apartment, my steps were heavy, but my resolve was steel. The aftershocks had begun, but they would not topple me. Nights became gentler once I let go of waiting for their calls. I silenced my phone, blocked their numbers again, and for the first time the quiet didn't feel empty. It felt protective. I filled that silence with pencil lines and brush strokes, rediscovering the rhythm I had abandoned years ago. Clara cleared a corner of her living room for me, setting up a second-hand easel she'd found at a thrift store. The first time I stood in front of it, brush trembling in my hand, I felt like I was meeting an old friend I had betrayed. My shoulders were stiff, my strokes uncertain, but little by little the canvas began to breathe. A skyline emerged, layered in blues and oranges, not unlike the one I had painted at 14. But this time, the light spilling from the windows wasn't imagined, it was mine. I started painting after every shift, even when exhaustion threatened to pin me to the couch. My muscles ached, but my spirit stretched wide. Some nights Clara sat nearby reading, offering gentle encouragement. Other nights I painted alone until the city outside blurred into dawn. Each finished canvas stacked against the wall was a reminder. My life was no longer consumed by bills and demands. It was mine to fill, mine to color. One Saturday morning, Ethan dropped by with coffee. He studied the canvases lined up in Clara's apartment, his eyebrows rising. "Damn, Floris. You've been holding out on us." I laughed, shaking my head. "It's nothing." "It's not nothing," he said firmly. "You should show these. People need to see what you've been carrying." His words lit something in me, a possibility I hadn't dared to imagine. Maybe one day, maybe soon, but the past wasn't finished with me yet. That afternoon, as I cleaned my brushes, my phone buzzed with a new message, this time from Dad. The tone was different, less angry, more resigned. "We can't keep up. Adrian lost his job. Your mother is falling apart. We need your help. Please, Nevi, you can't leave us like this." I stared at the screen, the words blurring as my pulse quickened. Once, a message like that would have dragged me back instantly, guilt sinking its claws into me. But now, surrounded by canvases and colors, the claws found no purchase. I typed a reply, slow and deliberate. "Rent is due. Late payments will incur fees." I hit send before I could hesitate, then immediately blocked his number. The silence that followed was deafening and liberating. That evening, I carried one of my new paintings to the storage unit, sliding it alongside the others stacked neatly against the wall. My shoeboxes of receipts still sat there too, but I noticed something had shifted. They no longer felt like anchors, holding me to the past. They felt like trophies, proof of everything I had survived, everything I had overcome. I locked the door and stepped back into the fading sunlight. The city stretched before me, alive with noise and possibility. When I returned to Clara's apartment, I opened my sketchbook and began a final drawing for the night. A door stood in the center of the page, wide open, light spilling out across the floor. On the threshold, a figure stood with her back turned, stepping forward. No chains, no shadows, no weight pulling her down. I added one last detail, a small set of keys left on the ground behind her, glinting in the light she no longer needed. As I closed the sketchbook, a deep calm settled over me. My life was no longer a cycle of giving until nothing remained. My victory wasn't revenge, though it looked like it from the outside. My victory was choosing myself at last. I leaned back, letting the sounds of the city wash over me, and smiled. The kind of smile that felt permanent, unshakable. I was free. And this time, no one could take that from me.